Timelie is a stealth puzzle adventure where you control time like a media player, perceive future events to plan your escape strategy from the past, sneak an enemy, and manipulate time through this companionship journey of a mysterious cat and a little girl with a precognitive power. Welcome to episode 43 of the 5 T's of Stealth, where we will be discussing Timelie. Once again, the 5 T's include tasks, terrain, tools, threats, and tension. These are what I consider to be the fundamentals of stealth gaming. Timelie is a puzzle stealth game, which means your objective is to solve the puzzle. In every puzzle for this game, that means make it to the exit door. There are several puzzle mechanics that we will discuss, but that will come later. All you need to focus on is getting your character or characters to the exit. In Timelie, you will play as a young girl and her cat companion. Throughout the 5 chapters of this game, some levels will have you controlling both characters, while others will just be one or the other. In Chapter 3, the girl and her cat are split up, and you will have some levels playing as each character. What I enjoyed about this was that while slowly reuniting the characters, you'll actually have some levels where they are both present, but you only control one. Let me explain. In Chapter 3, I completed a certain mission as the girl and eliminated some robots on my path. A few levels later, I ended up at the same location, but this time I was the cat, but those few robots were still eliminated. In other words, what I did as the girl affected what I could do as the cat later on. Let me continue. Later on, something similar happened. I completed a certain level as the girl, then later I returned as the cat once again. However, this was not later down the line, this was at the same time. So as the cat, I was in a separate section of the level, and I was watching what I had just done as the girl to complete the level. Now, what the girl was doing in real time was impacting my options as the cat. In other words, while playing as the cat, I had to time my actions to sync with what I had previously done as the girl. This is one of the coolest and most unique things I've ever experienced in a puzzle game. Not only do you finish the levels, but your results are shown to you and you have to sync with your past self. Let me continue again. In Chapter 5, there were some levels where you play as the girl, then watch a previous puzzle get completed by the girl and the cat in the past. Some serious time trickery going on here. In other words, you, as the player and as the girl, are now watching a past version of yourself complete the puzzle and have to once again sync up with them. There was one puzzle in particular that really blew me away with this concept. In the beginning of the game, you don't actually control the cat. The cat just runs around doing as it pleases. In one mission, before gaining control over the cat, while playing as the girl, the cat randomly meows and distracts a robot to save you. This confused me because it was just sudden and out of nowhere. Fast forward to Chapter 5, while playing as the girl, and you now have to go over there and force the cat to meow. This wasn't a random act, it was just done by future you. So again, your objective is simply to solve the puzzle and find the exit, but of course, there's much more complexity to it. In terms of the story, there's really not a lot to talk about. You play as this young girl who suddenly gains the ability to manipulate time. As you progress, you befriend a cat, and the game continues as you simply keep moving forward. Now, I'm going to spoil the last little bit of the game because this is all you get for story. After you beat Chapter 5, the cat starts glowing and shatters, prompting a little section where you try to rewind time to save the cat. Ultimately, this fails, but then a new door is revealed behind this giant clock in like a hub area. Once you go through that new door, a short scene plays where the girl wakes up and some sort of armored guard walks through the door with something that looked like a baton. In other words, the whole game was some sort of dream or simulation. I definitely interpret it as a simulation and the girl is being held against her will. However, I have no idea. This very brief scene is all you get. but it really makes your mind go into hyperdrive considering the outcomes. After completing the game, I realized there was a free DLC called Hell Loop, which allegedly offered 10 hours of extreme puzzle challenges. I decided to dip my toes in, but after completing the first chapter and most of chapter 2, I couldn't take it anymore. The developers very clearly state how this DLC is for the puzzle sickos who really love a challenge, and that there is no story stuff whatsoever. This interested me at least a little bit, but after a certain point, like I said, it was just too much. I think level design is hard to talk about when discussing the puzzle stealth subgenre, since you don't really have a map to discuss, you only have puzzles. So let me just say that the puzzle variety is pretty damn good. The game never feels stale and provides plenty of new ways to solve puzzles. I mentioned it already, but revisiting old puzzles with a new character or new section of the map is crazy design, and that absolutely has to be mentioned. I will say, visually, the game doesn't change much, and if I was forced to say something negative, it would simply be the lack of diverse environments. This isn't to say that there isn't any, but there's not a lot, and it feels like you're staring at the same walkways throughout the entire game. Personally, it doesn't bother me, but I know some people get annoyed by things of this nature. The main mechanic in Timelie is time manipulation. When the girl first walks into a new room, she puts her hands against her head and activates what I will be calling time manipulation mode. In this mode, the girl technically never actually moves, she's simply planning her route. While in this mode, you can move time forward and backwards, which will show how your enemies move and allow you to test how your characters will move. This timeline doesn't just allow you to fluctuate time, it also dictates how much time you have to solve the puzzle. You do not have infinite time in each level. All your planning must get your characters to the exit before the indicator on the timeline reaches the end. If it does reach the end, you'll have to rewind time and focus on being much more efficient. This is a point and click game, so your characters will simply move to where you click. Something I really like is how there are nodes on the ground for you to click on, so movement feels better in my opinion as someone who doesn't typically like point and click games. Having nodes to select made it feel like I had much more control over their movement than wildly clicking all over the place. You can also see your character's pathing when you hover a node, so you aren't surprised by which direction they decide to move. If you click at your character's feet, they will not move, and you can simply alter time as they stand still. As I mentioned several times now, you will be controlling two characters in this game, a girl and a cat. Let's start with the girl. The girl has two abilities, both of which will require you to pick up these cubes around the map, which act as ability charges. With any available charges, the girl can eliminate robots or reverse the time of broken walkways to repair them. In the final mission of each chapter, there will be purple orbs and purple bridges. The girl must walk over these orbs to repair these bridges, and it acts almost like a reset and a checkpoint. In these final missions, you have to collect all the purple orbs and therefore repair the map before you can complete the puzzle. Every time you collect a purple orb, it will automatically restore its associated bridge or walkway, then rewind you to the start of the mission, now with a new path. Moving on to the cat. You cannot pick up any orbs, but this also means your one ability does not require charges and is instead on a cooldown. The ability I'm referring to is, of course, a meow. The cat can meow, which will attract any robots in the vicinity to the location of the noise. The cat can also access locations that the girl cannot. This includes some vents and small openings at the bottom of some walls. There are two main puzzle mechanics in this game, both of which are very simplistic. First, we've got pressure plates linked to doors. In some levels, there will be several plates of different colors which are connected to the corresponding door of the same color. There are also little keypads that function the same way, but can only be operated by the girl. However, it would be a little funny to see the cat jump up and operate this, although it would have been pretty ridiculous. Just like the pressure plates, there will be keypads of different colors which correspond to the doors of the same color. Now, the fun thing here is that your enemies will also operate the keypads and walk over or even stand on the pressure plates, meaning you will have to match up your timing with your foes or even lure them away from a location. Sometimes you'll even have to trap them in a room and on a pressure plate to open a door for you to progress. Now, just who are these adversaries? There is only one enemy type in Timelie, and that is robots. These guys are pretty simple, but I actually really like them. Detection is all based around a simple vision cone with some robots moving and some standing still. However, whenever a robot comes to a brief stop, its head will do a 360 spin and a vision cone will cover every single direction. In other words, you've got to be very careful with your timing, and you can't really just sneak up and follow behind them like most stealth games. You end up having to really play the angles. You have to constantly be looking for that one node that falls in a robot's blind spot and send your character to stand on it. You can't always just hang back and wait, since you have a limited amount of time and precision is required. So sometimes you gotta be aggressive. I should also mention that these robots are much faster than you. So if they spot you, they will be on your ass very quickly. There's a couple chapter 5 specific things that I need to mention. I don't know if I made it completely clear, but in chapter 5, you only play as the girl. The major change in this section is how you interact with the past version of the other characters. The past girl now has a vision cone and basically functions like an additional enemy, except you lose instantly if your past self sees you and must rewind. The cat also has a vision cone, but when you are spotted by the cat, it will simply meow, which of course attracts the enemies to that location. There's one more mechanic in this game that I really love. In some levels, the ground will be falling apart. You have to be even more precise because every second wasted is a second closer you are to failing and falling from this crumbling world. There were so many levels where I just barely got my characters to flip a switch or slip past a robot as the world was falling apart on their heels. Hell, you even end up using the crumbling world to your advantage in some of these instances. A robot will lock onto you, but by the time it starts running at you, it just falls off the map and you continue on your way to the promised land. This game definitely had me on the edge of my seat more than a few times. Even with the time control mechanic, there is a lot of precision needed to make sure you can get your characters through each level safely. For me, the tension immediately became apparent within Chapter 2. Chapter 1 was pretty simple and did a solid job introducing the basics, and Chapter 2 was ready to take what you learned and run with it. Almost immediately into Chapter 2, you have to save the cat while the entire level crumbles behind them. It took me several attempts to get the timing down of fixing a broken path and flipping open a door while sweating that the cat had enough time to make it. Seriously, the key word here is precision. This game requires precision. This isn't just in the form of crumbling levels, however. As I mentioned earlier, the robot enemies have some pretty damn good detection, especially when you factor in their temporary 360-degree vision. There are several missions where you have to find that blind spot repeatedly to ensure your survival. Another almost horrific aspect of this game is using your characters as bait to take advantage of your robot aggressors. Once again, this precise timing required with triggering the robot's detection and still having an escape route was intense. Each level where I had to engage with these more extreme elements made me appreciate and enjoy this game more and more. I'd like to briefly touch on the Hell Loop DLC again because wow, it is actually so much more difficult, which I couldn't believe. I don't really want to talk about the new elements introduced in this DLC, considering I only scratched the surface, but right from the very first mission, you'll realize just how much more difficult the levels are in the aptly named Hell Loop. Aside from these specific moments, overall the puzzling is pretty difficult. I won't pretend that every level is a challenge, and you will most certainly steam through some of them. However, overall, These levels felt like they hit that sweet spot of puzzle difficulty, where you definitely have to pause and use your brain, but you're not constantly stuck and leaning towards frustration rather than fun. If you disagree with that statement and find Timelie to be too easy, then you can go and play Hell Loop. The developers were thinking of you when they made that DLC. Overall, Timelie is a pretty simple game. It isn't constantly bombarding you with new mechanics and enemies. It's just taking its core components and changing how they're used. I think the developers knew pretty quickly that they had come up with a special system here, and adding a bunch of bloat would do nothing but drag it down. Timelie is a stealth puzzle game about manipulating time to become a master of precision, and the tension it provided in those nail-biter moments will not be soon forgotten.